Miletus, these first three philosophers all hail. So it's within this setting of both Greek culture, but also the influence from the Near East. And we'll see as a sort of a running theme here with the pre-Socratics that a lot of this wisdom is coming from other places in the world. There are great civilizations in both Mesopotamia and Egypt, both of which will be the sort of the spoken origin of these wisdoms. We can think of from the Bible, the three wise men who come to visit Jesus. And these wise men are sort of in the Zoroastrian tradition. So long ago, long back, there is this Near Eastern tradition of wisdom. And the Greek philosophy that comes about, which I would say is probably distinct from it, like we can say it's its own thing, it is dependent almost entirely on this Near Eastern wisdom. We'll look to Babylon and like the star charts, the astrological knowledge that they had as perhaps the origin for a lot of these views that we'll sort of come to understand with Thales and Anaximenes. This idea that the heavens move in cyclical courses, that the seasons proceed one after another with some kind of logic and understanding, that you can understand what is below based on what is above. These are all sort of ideas within the milieu of where these first philosophers originate. Okay, so we have in 585 BC an eclipse, and we can date sort of, I don't know if we want to, the start of philosophy to this eclipse. The eclipse is attested all across different sources throughout sort of the ancient world. So we know this eclipse happened, and we have been told that Thales predicted this eclipse. Now, I would suggest he potentially did that based on sort of his knowledge of Near Eastern astronomy, and we don't necessarily think that he predicted it in the way that someone would predict an eclipse today. He likely did not predict, the hour of the eclipse, even the day of the eclipse, but perhaps only its year. Even so, this is pretty good, and we date the start of philosophy from this time. If you want to get very these are the great men of the world, yes, and this is the time exactly that it began. And we can see that with Thales comes right away the stereotypical image of the philosopher. So right away with the first philosopher, we have this stereotype, this caricature of like someone whose head is in the clouds. They are not practical. They are always dreaming, always thinking, always considering the forest and missing the trees. So with our first fragment, Arco, do you want to? Are you able to follow along with the pre-Socratic reader? Do you have that one? Or do you
is it the first link or the second link?
It would be the first link there. Did you grab that one?
Yeah, let me just pull it up.
Yeah. So if everyone, we can follow along. I'll get you guys to.
I got it.
To read, it'll be hilarious.
Do you want me to read it out loud?
Yeah, read us that first fragment there. Number 1.
Let me get to the page.
On page 13. or 28 of the.
Okay, page 13, number 1 under Thales.
Yeah.
Okay. They say that once when Thales was gazing upwards while doing astronomy, he fell into a well, and that a witty and charming Thracian serving girl made fun of him for being eager to know the things in the heavens, but failing to notice what was just behind him and right by his feet. Oof.
Yeah, so I suggested, this is like the beginning of the philosopher sort of stereotype. Does anyone have any thoughts on that one?
It kind of reminds me of the phrase "missing the forest for the trees" kind of thing.
Yeah. It's sort of this idea of like his head is always in the clouds. He's watching. Yeah, he's got his eye on the big picture, but not on the little picture, or not on what is practical. However,
Yeah.
we can see. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I was just going to say sort of two things there. One is like, it also seems as if there's kind of a condemnation. Like, what good is philosophy if you're just going to fall in a well kind of thing? And the other is this sense of like, you mentioned the big things and the little things, which I know becomes a big question later in philosophy. Like, how can we have unity of the whole and things breaking apart as separate entities within it?
Yeah, no, that is a great point. I think, I think there is a sort of condemnation of philosophy as a bit of a weakness, right? This is not, although Odysseus is wise and sort of crafty, he's not necessarily, he's practical. He's not necessarily someone who has given up this world and is devoted to the next. But here we have in the second fragment sort of a retort to that view. And a sort of response of, well, is philosophy useless, or what use could philosophy have? So, Sky, do you want to read the second uh, the second one here, the second paragraph, fragment number 2?
The links are in the announcements. So if you go to the announcements channel and scroll up to where Jacob made the announcement about the Philosophy Reading Club, then you can see the 2 links. The link that we're reading from right now is the first link.
Yes. Hatada, you're definitely in referencing Aristophanes. This is a great point. So later on, Aristophanes will satirize Socrates as sort of exactly in this way, with his sort of as a philosopher with his head in the clouds. And in that, Socrates is very unlike the Socrates that appears in the Platonic dialogues. He is very much modeled after the Phousakoi. And the Phousakoi are indeed these pre-Socratic philosophers that we're discussing now. So the stereotype that Aristophanes uses to mock Socrates is taken and born right out of Thales and these early philosophers. So Dantes, if you have the text and you can find page, I guess 13/28 in the PDF, would you read fragment number 2?
Sorry, what page?
It's 28 in the PDF, but 13 by the page number.
Okay. Do I start by 7 or the central? Where do I start?
So on page 13, you can see the number 2, fragment number 2, at the bottom.
Oh shit! I'm sorry. I'm so lost because I'm on page 28 of the PDF, right?
Yeah,
And I
yeah, it
see
should say, yeah, it should be at the bottom, like number 1, number 2. Or perhaps you're on the second PDF, not the first. Anyway, I will read this paragraph.
I think I'm on the second PDF. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're all good. All right.
I got
So,
it pulled up.
sweet, Sky. Awesome.
I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
You're fine. The story goes that when they were reproaching him for his poverty, supposing that philosophy is useless, he learned from his astronomy that the olive crop would be large. Then, while it was still winter, he obtained a little money and made deposits on all the olive presses, both in Miletus and in Chios. And since no one bid against him, he rented them cheaply. When the time came, suddenly many requested the presses all at once, and he rented them out on whatever terms he wished, and so he made a great deal of money. In this way, he proved that philosophers can easily be wealthy if they wish, but this is not what they are interested in.
A regular old Adam Smith.
Oh my
Awesome.
god! It was a trap. I fucking knew it.
exactly. So we have here, I guess, two competing visions here of the philosopher. One as sort of perhaps a doddering fool, missing, what's in front of him. But the second, he's able to turn this knowledge, this abstract knowledge, into something quite useful indeed. Though perhaps that's not what motivates such a search. So here, I guess we have an early notion of like what should motivate philosophy. Should it be motivated by sort of this desire for practicality, or should it be motivated by more sort of abstract desires, the love of wisdom, perhaps? I don't know. We're definitely anachronistic there, but what should motivate philosophy? Should it be worthy of search for its own sake? Should it, is it useless? Is it useful? Should we, so perhaps you have thoughts there. You've been ridiculed by your friends or family for pursuing philosophical ideas. So, perhaps you have ideas. Do you think philosophy is useful? Is it useless? What do you think?
Are you just asking anyone?
Yeah.
Well, I actually was a philosophy major, so I got this a lot, especially because, back then philosophy was so much more about like the beginnings of science, and now it's like people don't really understand a lot about it. I think this story is kind of funny because they're saying like because he was poor, everybody thought philosophy was useless, because this guy is living in poverty and he's a philosopher. But he basically says, I could have money if I wanted to have money. It's just not what I'm interested in. And I guess that's kind of where I came at it from in college. Was I just was really interested in it, and I didn't really care when people said like, well, you'll never get a good job that way. I was like, that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's, I can certainly relate to that. Yeah, and I guess the idea of it's not going to be immediately beneficial, but there's some sort of outgrowth of it that will be very beneficial. That if you're stuck to what is purely for utility's sake, then you'll miss sort of the benefits of something that you might pursue for other reasons. I don't know, but do you have any thoughts on sort of the instrumentality of philosophy? Should we do it for its sake, for our sake?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think the answer of if we should do it for our sake or some other sake. I think it's yes in both cases. Um, like using philosophy as an instrumental good, I think that's totally cool, and we should do it in that way. Like we can use it to like question our institutions. We can use it to figure out how to program AI for self-driving cars so that the AI is making ethical choices or choices we would agree with. There are these practical applications. And then on the other hand, there are these other things about philosophy that are just kind of, to me, sort of like intrinsically good by itself, where I can use it to ask questions about things I find good, goodness in itself.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would also add that I went to a liberal arts school and they had this saying about liberal arts education, which was that the idea was to teach you how to think. And I always related that to philosophy really hard. It wasn't really about what you were thinking about so much as how to think in general, which expanded to anything you ever thought about because you could do it so much more organized and logical and come at it from all these different angles and kind of really just learn how to think about things. And then you could be more discerning with what you chose to think about and see it more clearly.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, and one that we'll see hopefully in the Milesian philosophers here. So in that, they're most famous, Thales is most famous for saying everything is water, right? And, we can just come out and say it, that is a wrong view, right? But we can see that how they think about this and the way that the sort of the dialogue and the discourse and the theory will evolve, sort of have problems, and then they'll sort of seek to patch those problems. We'll end up with a quite more dynamic and descriptive theory at the end of it than at the beginning. So I think, whether the Milesians here are correct or not is something we can, maybe put on the back burner and instead say, like, well, how are they going about these things? What is the method that they are using that's different? And
And to
when
your
you look, oh, go ahead.
sorry to interrupt. To your point, Thales said that the whole universe is water, but the idea that the universe could have some type of commonality is still present in our physics today. Like we can look to string theory, where they're saying that everything is fundamentally this like string or this membrane which vibrates at a frequency or something, and that like sort of entails this physical property at higher levels. So it doesn't seem that different to me as a method to say the universe is water or the universe is frequency.
Absolutely. Now, we have to be a little careful because we don't know what Thales exactly meant by his statement. Because what we know is mostly through Aristotle. So Aristotle distinguishes the four causes: efficient, formal, final, and material causes. And the material cause, he would say, is the one employed by these Milesian philosophers. So they want to say that whatever is happening, whatever's taking place, is caused by the material that it's made out of. And we don't know that Thales held that there is all one substance, water, that everything is truly. He could have meant that everything simply emerges out of water. There are certain accounts that we can read, certain of these fragments. Let me try to find a good one. That sort of explain his views of the way that things emerged from water. Of this.
Yeah, well, I guess that's what all of the early pre-Socratics were doing was they were looking around at existence and they were saying this must be made up of something, and it's probably all the same thing because it's all existence. I don't remember the reasoning behind that, but So Thales was looking at it and saying, I see it looks like it's all made up of water because everything needs to drink water and the ocean is full of water and the plants grow from water. And so that's what he thought. I think it was Heraclitus that thought everything was made of fire.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely correct. But I think it is important to see sort of um, what qualities are drawing him to that notion. So Thales has a few quotes. So some say the soul is mixed with the whole universe, and perhaps this is why Thales supposed that all things are full of gods. So there's and the second quote, that from what is related about him, it seems that Thales too held the soul is something productive of motion, if indeed he said that the lodestone has soul because it moves iron. So we have here, I guess, this idea of the magnet, right? And that within matter, there's something alive, I guess, that within materia, like if there is one physical substance, there is something there that is in some sense divine, or in some sense a god, because it moves. There's this idea that what moves is what's divine, and you can think of that water is always moving. It's always changing places. It's always raining or rolling downhill or rolling in a river to the sea. In the sea, it's always like swirling and there are tides, etc. So water is always changing, and in that sense, it's always in motion. It's always and it has some kind of living force that we are all part of. We're all mostly water, right? There's this idea that we emerged from the water, that there were like fish that crawled up onto land and birthed us, that he produced. So not in an evolutionary sense, but in a in a sort of strange pre-evolutionary sense, that we emerged from the water. And indeed, there's this idea that you are born out of something, you die, you go back into that thing, that same thing, so that what you are is sort of a temporary state between two unlimited sort of points of what they call, the unlimited. And this idea of unlimit or indiscernible or interminable, sort of like something that goes on endlessly, this is going to come back again with Anaximander. So there's sort of a lot there, but we can see that he's trying to explain the particular things that we see in terms of general principles, and rather than looking for gods as the explanation, he's looking at material processes. Does anyone have any sort of thoughts about any of these quotes? Did any of these Thales quotes particularly stand out to you?
Well, it seems like there's kind of this notion of like causation, like the four different causes that Aristotle was talking about, and trying to understand how things are changing, and almost like I don't know. You mentioned that there's that sort of divine aspect there, and it kind of seems to me like when man is faced with something we can't directly see, like causation, we have to infer causation. We can't directly see it. So because we can't directly observe it, we have to sort of build a god of the gaps there, and then it becomes this divine thing, as if something like ineffable. that's sort of how, when you mention like the divine aspect, like there's a divinity of like man, or there's a divinity of, you know, the spirits and in the matter. That's sort of what it reminded me of, where there's this thing that we're kind of inferring is there. We can't actually see it, so we give it this name to describe something like the ineffable, the spirit, the divine. In a way, it's kind of like the God of the Gaps, but the Greek version.
Yeah, I see what you mean, but I think, you know, these are people for whom the gods mean something a little bit different. Like, I think we could substitute this idea of vitality or vitalism to say that, you know, the magnet attracts because it, you know, it is a soul. It's yearning for those dust particles, those metal filings or whatever, and they, you know, they're attracted to it. You know, that this is these are souls in motion, and that motion itself is not sort of in a Cartesian sense, like one thing bumping into another, transferring like an energy, but rather a soul in motion, like a vital force, like an animal. We can think of, you know, when we think of a tiger, right? We don't think, oh, you know, the various chain of events kind of bumped around and did this in a sort of a clockwork. No, we think of like the tiger as a vital force. Does that make sense? So in the
Yeah,
same
yeah. I
way,
mean, I get the notion of the soul there, but I was speaking more to the notion of it being divine.
oh sure, yeah, and certainly as we will see, what the divine is um, will shift and change, and it will go from this Homeric idea, which, you know, holds the gods as sort of larger than life humans that have squabbles and, you know, drama and uh, sort of personalities, um, and it will go and it will shift towards a much more um, you could say less superstitious faith, one that seeks to purify itself of sort of unrational or irrational beliefs about the gods, one that sort of shifts away from reliance on Homer and tradition and one into what is fitting, asking the question about the gods, like, well, what is fitting of a god? Is it fitting of a god to get into like a jealous like fight with his wife? Well, I mean, you know, that, or is that merely a matter of our own uh, subjective, or, you know, our own frame of reference, as Xenophanes will say? You know, the goats, I may be paraphrasing, but the goats will, you know, have gods that look like goats, and the pigs will have gods that look like pigs, etc. So what more can I say here about Thales before we move on? Is there anything anyone wants to say about Thales before I go off again? Okay.
Sorry, did Thales also, was he also the one? Uh, am I getting him mixed up with the other philosopher, the ship of? Isn't there the ship of Thales, or is that the different dude? Another guy.
That's the ship of Theseus.
Theseus. Okay.
Yeah, who's I guess a mythological figure, mythological king of a city that I will try not to get wrong. All right. So we have here the Fusakoi, and this is sort of where we get our word physics, the Greek word phusis, which means essentially like the study of nature, the natural world. And we have here, yeah, the Fusakoi are the people who study it, the natural philosophers. And with what makes this group distinct and what is explicit in Anaximander is that this group looks for what is known as the arche, and that is essentially a single principle by which you can explain other principle or other things in nature. So, sort of a central assumption that's behind all of science, all of philosophy, all of anything, is that things are compressible. That I could write an explanation for the physical activity of the universe. It's somehow shorter than, or could be contained within the physical universe. So for anyone who's ever tried to write and explain anything, you can write hundreds of pages on 1 + 1 = 2, right? You could go on forever. So the idea that you could somehow condense the universe or explain it in simpler terms, to do something like E = mc², to sum up and simplify whole branches of physics, like something like that. To do that requires a certain sort of compressibility of the universe, and that assumption really begins here with the Fusicoi, and they're looking for the arche, looking for one thing, one principle that will explain everything. So for Thales, that principle, of course, is water, and our origin is water. The earth was said to rest upon a great ocean, and the changing states of water. That water freezes and then it melts and then it evaporates and then it forms a cloud and then it rains. These changing states were seen to explain the way that water could somehow be everything, as if water could be fire. But there are problems with this theory. Like, how could water be fire? How could water be something that is incredibly unlike water? So there are sort of problems with this theory. How could one thing that is a definite thing, like water, be all of the other definite things? Wouldn't it make more sense if the origin of all things in this principle wasn't one of those things, but rather the indefinite or unlimited itself? So here we have this notion with Anaximander of the apeiron, or the apeiron. I might be pronouncing that terribly, but anyway, it is for us, something that might mean boundless, or it might mean that which cannot be traversed, sort of like an unlimited distance, but in any sense boundless. So not in Greek is negates whatever the word is, so it is without bound. And we can think of here what Thales said about the earth resting on the sea. The earth is a sort of a limited thing, but it rests on an unlimited sea. And there's some way in which what we exist now as mortals is a limited existence, but what we will return to when we all go back to the earth and our atom, our bodies mix in with the ground or whatever, will return to this sort of unlimited state that we from whence we once came. And we can now, I guess, if you want, we can go to Anaximander. Is there anything you want to say about Thales before we depart this poor individual, the greatest philosopher of all time, pretty much for at least until Plato comes around?
I think that the number 6 quote is kind of funny, where it says Thales said that the Earth was resting on water, but he never really thought about what the water was resting on.
Yes. Yes. No,
So
this
that's
is definitely a problem, and we can think about. And so this is addressed in an Anaximander. We can, Anaximander will say that the Earth is resting on nothing because it's at the exact center. Because it's in the middle, it has nowhere to go, because if something simply just at rest and it's equidistant from all other points, it's not more likely to go up then down or left then right, and so will remain completely at rest. So that's what Anaximander will say. Anaximenes has like the Earth uh, floating on a giant column of air, so that's a little bit more fanciful. Sort of like a leaf being like held up by a giant column of air.
now
But
when we say the Earth, were they thinking of a flat Earth or a round Earth? Just an as an aside.
oh, they were thinking of the essentially the uh so Thales 100%. Actually, no, yes, all of them. Uh Cylindrical Earth is their model.
Okay.
Two faces. So it is a flat Earth, I guess. Yeah, it's a round flat Earth. Um,
A disc.
a disc, yeah, or a cylinder. Like it
This
has
world.
two faces. So apparently there are people on the other side. Um, yeah, and you can see in that the second link there is a visualization. There are a couple of good diagrams of what Anaximenes thought, and the amazing 100% accurate cosmology will continue with Anaximander. So we can go on to him. Do I want to read this one? Who wants to read Dantes? Do you want to read quote number 15 from Anaximander?
Okay, wait. So is this the first one or the second?
It's quote number 15. It should have a 15 beside it. The paragraph, it's like on page 18 of the Socratic Reader, going by like the actual page numbers.
Page 18. And
But it's 33 of the PDF.
okay. And you said 15, right?
Yeah, yeah, top of the page.
Okay. The Earth is aloft and it is not supported by anything. It stays at rest because its distance from all things is equal. The Earth's shape is curved, round, like a stone column. We walk on one of the surfaces, and the other one is the set opposite. The stars come to be as a circle of fire separated off from the fire in the cosmos and enclosed by dark mist. There are vents, certain tube-like passages at which the stars appear. For this reason, eclipses occur when the vents are blocked. The moon appears sometimes waxing, sometimes waning, as the passages are blocked or opened. The circle of the sun is 20 times that of the earth, and that of this moon 18 times. Actually, I read that wrong, but and the sun is the highest, and the circle of the fixed stars lowest. Winds occur when the finest vapors of the dark mist are separated off and collected together and then are set in motion. Rain results from vapor arising from the earth under the influence of the sun. Lightning occurs whenever wind escapes and splits the clouds apart.
Hmm.
He was pretty good for rain.
Ugh, I am terrible at reading, but yeah, damn, he got rain right.
That's pretty cool.
Yes. So here we have this idea that um, there is a sphere of fire, essentially like a ring of fire in the heavens, and that's what, lightning comes from. That's what the stars and the sun are. And there's also this obscuring whole dark mist, um, which I guess he is going to say is responsible for, like, that's what the the night sky is, I guess, and the stars are sort of like what shows through holes within this mist. So this seems like a little bit like, is pretty, could be like a sort of a wacky view, but this goes to his explanation of sort of the cosmology, how things come to be. And we have, excuse me, what emerges from the unlimited are these sort of opposites. And just like Thales uses motion to sort of explain these things, so I would say does Anaximander. What the motion is up for scholarly debate. So there are different motions that could be, it could be like a sieve, like a giant sieving, like if you've ever sifted flour or something, by which the universe is shaken, and the hot stuff goes to the bottom and the cold stuff stays at the top. It could be a great spinning, which by sort of like centrifugal forces, these various things are separated off. And I like the spinning model. I would say, this is my personal opinion, but I think there are other motions here. But anyway, that these differences, these, hot and cold, a dark mist and a fire, these things are going to be separated off by the motion of the heavens, because everything's sort of like in motion, spinning. And this is what is going to explain quite a lot of things. So like the seasons, tides, what time you should plant your crops, a number of things. And we can think back maybe to those Near Eastern societies that structured their lives very heavily on these astrological readings. But we can now, I think, go to what is like the sort of first fragment in all of philosophy. Everything
Wait,
up to now. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, sorry, I'm not sure if you finished, but before we go there, I want to ask something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a bit confused what was meant by vent in the passage I read.
Okay. You and most other people, I would say. For me, so if I'm reading this, there's a dark mist that's blocking our view from this fire, and there are holes within the mist that are like vents, like tube-like vent holes. And then so like when we see a star, what that is like, it's actually like a sphere of fire that we just can't see it because it's being blocked by mist. We can just see through these pinprick holes within the mist,
Ah, okay, it makes sense now.
I think. But
I'm having
part of, go ahead.
I'm having a hard time conceptualizing the vents and moving. Like, obviously they saw that the stars were moving. So, like, what are the vents the thing that's moving in the sky?
Yes,
And
perhaps
what's
the
behind the
mist.
vent is still or something?
Perhaps the mist is, I think everything is like spinning in motion, right? They consider the earth to be still, but the heavens to be spinning around it. So that, yeah, like the fixed stars or whatever would be moving around. I agree it's not a very good representation of like the planets. I don't know, is there any mention of the planets here? But weirdly, the moon and the sun are further away than the fixed stars in this model. So there are all sorts of like massive problems here. Like I think. But we'll see. The through
So,
critique to better.
but um, in this case, it doesn't seem like he's saying the Earth is flat, right? You say the shape is curved and round. Oh wait, I mean, I guess stone column would be a cylinder, right?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, never mind.
I wish I knew this quote before the cylindrical Earth debate.
Oh my God.
I would have used this as my argument.
That's true. That's pretty funny.
But we can have, we can think of Ptolemaic astronomy when we and sort of their models when from this Anaximander quote that says the stars are born by circles and spheres upon which each one is mounted. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it is hard not to be anachronistic in our readings about this. So we want to not think of necessarily like the crystalline spheres of Ptolemy that are sort of the growth of this. Like this could be anything, but I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it has. Yeah, the sun is equal to the earth, and the circle where it has its vent and on which it is carried is 27 times the size of the earth. So I don't know. The sun has a vent. Perhaps the sun is just like a hole again in the mist. I am unsure what vent means. I agree. It is very confusing.
Yeah, it's pretty weird. And also, actually, sorry, I go back to this, but it's it's saying the shape of the Earth is curved and round like a stone column. So, and it might not be the case that it's saying it's cylindrical. You could just be saying that it's like a stone column, referring to the curvedness. So, like, it is curved in a sense like a stone column, but it might not be referring that it is like entirely like a stone column, like it entirely as a cylinder, or I mean,
Sure. Sure. No, I wouldn't. I think we are open here.
because it's like I don't. I mean, I thought at least that these philosophers back then they were kind of like seeing these objects to be like sort of imperfection, right? I don't see why they would ever like think like a cylinder is something that looks like it's perfect or whatever, right? So it wouldn't
mm,
make I don't doesn't make much sense to me. Like something that's
right.
completely round would make more sense to me.
Right. And I think that certainly the arguments that underlie around Earth, um, basically that like the Earth is the center, and that if everything just packs evenly towards the center, it is a sphere, which Aristotle uses. Um, these are sort of found in Anaximander, that the Earth is at the center and that it has nowhere to go. I just don't think they're quite there yet to go that like this is like the very right. So we're like, is the Earth an iceberg that's floating on the water? Maybe not. Maybe it's just at the center. Um, but and in terms of perfection, I think that this idea is not yet. We're not yet at that idea. That idea will come out of Plato and out of this idea of a divine mind that things ought to be beautiful, or that there is a mind behind the universe that is trying to make things perfect, or make things aspire to perfection, or in some way make things for the good. I think these are all more sort of material explanations. These are like, well, it is that way because when they were aged advanced, they came out into the drier part, the bark broke off, they lived a different mode of life. Like it's a much more naturalistic explanation, I guess.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah, so well, how does this reconcile with like the role of the gods? Because it seems like what they're trying to do is explain things that were kind of explained by the gods before, like what causes lightning and what causes rain. And instead of just saying a god did it, they're trying to say, oh no, it was this like combination of wind and these vents, and they're trying to have these like more scientific, understandable explanations. So
Absolutely.
were they just saying that like these gods don't control those things, or that these gods obey the wind and the vents?
Right. And this is a question that will get us right down to Socrates' charge for impiety, which lead to his death, right? Whether Socrates was teaching new gods, or whether he was, had reverence for the old gods, and these sort of critiques of Xenophanes about sort of anthropomorphizing the gods. I think to view this as like purely like a sort of like atheist or something like that is wrong, right? This is like a new religion in a way. This is the worship of logos, not mythos. So this is like they are now worshiping the water, and the way to worship it is not to necessarily like pray to it or whatever. They're just trying to understand it, but it is divine still. It is a great spirit, I think. But it is certainly, I think it's new. It's not, or at least it's a, you could argue it's a clarified understanding of what they've meant by gods all along. But yeah, it's definitely this huge shift from sort of myth and trying to explain the world in terms of what your grandfather told you about stories about how to be a great man and stuff like that, and to understand things in terms of what is fitting. This question of like, well, what is fitting for the gods? What is and to understand the world in terms of, I guess, natural, what we would see as natural explanations, or um, efficient, like if like how these things happen. We're looking at like not like that a personality is behind this, but some kind of impersonal force. And we have with Anaximander the first statement of philosophy. So we move from, I would say, this personal god, this personal force, to an impersonal legalistic force. So we're now looking not for um, like a god to be the king or whatever, but we're just looking for the laws. We're looking for the laws that underlie nature. So there is that legalistic language here in this
Speaking of
Anaximander.
speaking
Go
of
ahead.
nature, the last Anaximander quote is wild. Like, is it okay if I just read it?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, this is number 20. Anaximander believed that there arose from heated water and earth either fish or animals very like fish. In these, humans grew and were kept inside as embryos up to puberty. Then finally they burst and men and women came forth already able to nourish themselves.
Nice. So, yeah, I mean, that is very ludicrous, I guess.
But he
Perhaps a
gets
pseudo
he
evolutionary theory.
right. He gets something right in the sense that, like, just from the historical record, we see that life started with water, um,
Right.
and
Right.
then
And what he's doing though is he's responding to um, sort of a known argument in philosophy, which is um, how did humans first begin? If every human is a baby and is like begins as a baby and is unable to care
chicken
for
or egg
themselves,
kind of thing.
then yeah, then like who was the first to how did the first babies emerge? So um, we will say God, the gods made them, like made adult humans out of the earth or something. Um,
But no, he was
but
like, it's natural. The fish came first, like the water and earth made fish, and then those fish made like had embryos, which became humans, and they birthed us.
yes, fully adult though, so that they could take
Yeah,
care of themselves and then have regular kids. But yeah, I mean, it
he's
is.
Yo, but did you?
he's not far off from Darwin.
No, but look at 19 though, the one before.
He also declares that in the beginning, humans were born from animals of a different kind, since other animals quickly manage on their own and humans alone require lengthy nursing. For this reason, they would have not have survived if they had been like this at the beginning.
Damn, bro.
Yeah, so we can see, yeah, here like these. Yeah, I mean, clearly just and these are they're no experiments going on. It's sort of like you're thinking about the principles behind these things, especially for Anaximander, who is um, sort of the more rationalist of these. Like he is the one that's has abstract principles at work.
He's
Like
doing a pretty good job.
yeah, yeah, and I mean, Anaximander's a baller. But let's go to the very first statement in all of philosophy, which is this Anaximander fragment, and here it is. Okay, so the
Is it in
things,
this document?
yeah, yeah. So I'll read it. It's at the end of quote 9. So it's this is the fragment. So this is what we actually have that he wrote, translated obviously. The things that are perish into the things from which they come to be, according to necessity, for they pay penalty and retribution to each other for their injustice in accordance with the ordering of time. So that is like the first statement of philosophy.
That's sounds like entropy.
It's so I can give you my interpretation of it. Um,
But before you go there, what do you mean by first thing of philosophy?
so everything up until now that we've been discussing, all those fragments, have been from other authors talking about Thales or quoting him indirectly. This this fragment that I just read is actually, we think that this is a quote from Thales. Like this is a Aristotle actually quotes, or actually Simplicius um, quotes him. So we actually have, although the text has been lost to us, we actually have this quote from him. So, you know, any other philosophy is older, is newer than this. This is the oldest statement that we have.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, what does it mean? So the things that are perish into the things from which they come to be. So in my view, this is sort of like the idea that like, yeah, when you die and your body goes back into the earth from which you sort of originated in the first place. So there is this, we are limited, but there's this unlimited base into which we've sort of like we've separated off somehow. We've been sifted down, or swirling of the universe has separated us. And there is this kind of perhaps a cyclical movement in which, okay, so so this happens, the things that are perish into the things from which they come to be. So we could also think of this as not just true for our souls or whatever, but also true for opposites. So like hot and cold, or summer and winter. Summer and winter pass away and sort of perish into one another, according to a sort of necessity. And they pay penalty and retribution to each other for their injustice in accordance with the ordering of time. So this is the idea that like summer takes over from winter and does an injustice against winter, but then in doing this injustice, it has then an injustice done to it by fall, and so on, and the cycle continues. That would be one reading of it, but really, what do you guys think this means? What does this mean to you? Does it mean anything? Certainly, there's a recourse to a legal metaphor here, so we're moving, I guess, sort of from what Sky said, like moving away from like a personal God, more towards like try to understand the necessity and the laws according to which nature changes.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like from dust to dust. But then the transactional element is interesting. And in particular, the injustice part of it. That seems like, well, what is that about? What kind of injustice happened?
Well, I mean, think about it, and like normally like we have things tending to go to equilibrium, and you're like fighting against it. Maybe that could be as an injustice, or just a metaphor. I don't know. Why is there a dead silence?
Oh, I'm just trying to think about it in that way. Like leaving equilibrium is the injustice kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean you're fighting against, right? I mean, I don't know. I know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, we really don't know here. All we can do is try to speculate and try to, what they are doing about the universe, right? Where they're just sort of speculating, I think is sort of all we can do about what they are meaning.
Do
So
we
I
know
don't
whether
think it's
these are? Do we know whether these are correctly translated?
so we could get into like the ancient Greek translation. Actually, Heidegger has like a whole thing on this like one statement where he goes through the ancient Greek. You could read that.
Yeah. Okay. So I thought of something. So like, if you're like, the equilibrium thing would maybe be like your things are how things are meant to be, and like all living life or whatever, all these things are like fighting against it, or like fighting against time to survive or whatever, against how things are going to be, which is you're gonna go and return to dust, or you're like fighting against it or something. That could be like the injustice.
Yeah, possibly. Another thought I had was this notion of like sort of presupposing that the world must be just, especially if like you take kind of the mythology into account, where they thought that the world arose out of chaos and now we're in order. So if the world is ordered, then something like perishing, that wouldn't be unjust. otherwise we wouldn't be in an ordered and just world. It wouldn't make sense. So to be in an ordered and just world, if things are perishing, it means some injustice occurred. And this is the penalty and retribution for that injustice. But what the injustice is isn't really given.
Yeah, I think it's really in doubt, like what the things that are. If he's talking about, somewhat like a simply a thing that is in a conventional sense, or if he's talking about um, what we might more think of as like a quality, like something like hot and cold, or the opposite, so that we could understand this as similar to a Heraclitean notion of the unity of opposites, that fire turns into hot, fire turns into water, turns into air, turns into, and perhaps with this view that everything comes out of the unlimited. All of these things are somehow able to turn into one another, or pay, or perhaps these opposites are sort of fighting in this way, that doing injustice to one. That would be my view, but again, that's very shaky. But we have this idea of the ordering of time here, that time moves on an ecliptic, right, in a cyclical motion, that there are regularities within time, that it comes back around. Spring will follow winter, will and summer will follow spring, fall will follow summer, and around again, in these sort of natural orders, and looking for these laws, and sort of everything as being accounted for on account of sort of a regular motion. I think that sort of might sum up Anaximander. But again, I want to underline this notion of the unlimited, explaining limited, in this case in terms of the unlimited, but we're making this distinction. Okay, so enough with all of that highfalutin nonsense about the unlimited. Anaximenes would say, let us get down to brass tacks. How could something no one has ever seen count for things that we see? That doesn't make sense. Let us instead look around. Let us be empirical. Let us make some basic observational experiments. Beginnings of so of the three here that we're doing today, Anaximenes is definitely the most he is the practical one of the bunch. He is at times completely diametrically wrong, but he believes the exact opposite of what is the actual case, but he is still giving a different type of argument. So where Anaximander is sort of giving a more theoretical argument from his sort of principles that are invisible, and his sort of his head is in the clouds, Anaximenes, he is at least sort of arguing a little bit from observation. This idea that the natural world can maybe explain itself if we give it a chance. We don't need to have recourse to things that cannot be seen, or at least we can make easy and more logical inferences, so that although air cannot be seen, we could say that we can easily infer it from its motion. So like the unlimited, and like water before it, air is a substance that pervades everything, is all around us, and is sort of invisible. We breathe it in as a source of life, a soul, and is always in motion, always and in some sense divine, associated with the spirit. So Anaximenes, sort of water or the unlimited, he believes the arche, this single principle that we can explain everything, is air. The mode by which air becomes everything is actually explained by Anaximenes, instead of sort of left for us to infer. So instead of just quote unquote motion, and we have to like figure out what type of motion, he's talking about condensation, rarefaction. So something becomes more dense or more rare, it will change state. So air can get more dense, become rarer, more sparse, and with some, we can all do this experiment. Okay, so if you purse your lips, you make a tiny hole, then you blow. It is cool air. You feel it on your cool air. But then you open your mouth, you go, you blow again, but like in a hot, gross. But anyway, that is hot. Therefore, when things are rarer, when they are more compact, they're cooler. And when they are, when they're more compact and denser, they're cooler. And when they're rarer or rarefied, less dense, they are hotter, which is the exact opposite of it. But anyway, we can all do that experiment and we can see the logic that led him to that. Does anyone need help? That experiment, you all good?
It worked for me.
That was pretty fun.
I'm literally doing it.
Awesome.
I'm gonna use this in a debate in the future.
Awesome. Handing out amazing.
Yeah, I think I hope I'm not spoiling, but I think I literally just read a quote saying that he thinks air is God.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Do you want to read that quote?
I have no idea where I found it. Let me check. I saw it somewhere.
23.
Yeah. And how do you say his name?
Anaximenes.
Anaximenes determined that air is a god and that it comes to be and is without measure, infinite, and always in motion.
Right. So there you have. It's infinite. It's unlimited. Right. And we don't want to think of this in a modern sense of infinite. We want to think of this as unlimited, going on like I guess in a more basic sense, like oh man, this is unlimited. This is without end. So maybe instead of like a sort of a strict mathematical notion of infinite, we just want to say like without boundary.
I like the dude.
And it's in motion. So perhaps this God will explain everything, whereas we don't need God of.
What did he mean by God in this case?
So think of it as like a vital force, a soul, right? Because motion for the Greeks is it, like think of it like an animal, like a tiger, right? Tiger doesn't move because of like other reasons. It's not like it's a tiger, right? It moves because it's vital force. It's like an entity that is moving. So anything that moves is alive. Does that make sense? So if
Yeah, but
nature
it wouldn't
something in nature moves, then it's alive. Like a
but it
magnet
wouldn't
moves.
it wouldn't be like a law.
It wouldn't be a
Um,
law.
Yeah, because like laws are quite more
Hmm.
fixated or
Right. Yeah, I mean, I would say Anaximander is the one that is looking more towards this idea of law, this legalistic language. Anaximenes seems more to be more to be focused on sort of like not empirical, but observation-based explanation. Trying to explain things based on his principle of air, which at least kind of exists. So he can now. So his theory is basically like leaves float around on air because they're flat. The Earth is flat, floats on air, right? Otherwise, it could not float on air like a leaf. And so are all the other planets. They also float on air like a leaf.
In a way, this is true, because whenever things condense together, like stars are just all of these things condensing together, and then the gravity there starts to create fusion. Like if you get enough condensation together, you'll get a star, and enough of that star, you'll get an explosion, which creates these higher elements, which also condense. And so, from a certain perspective, like the universe is gas, is air.
Yeah, I mean, it's like hydrogen, I guess, that's been like condensed and rarefied. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he is not wrong. Yeah, and I think in taking something like air as the principle, rather than sort of an indefinite principle, he's definitely making a move that will be countered very quickly by other Greek philosophers who move in the opposite direction. But someone like Aristotle will look to him, and people like Empedocles come along as other sort of observation-based philosophers. So, what more to be said about Anaximenes? I mean,
Are there any other cool observations you made? And
like I think we're good on him. Maybe we can very quickly touch on Xenophanes and sort of bring it to a close here. So, a lot of the time that Xenophanes was viewed as, so he is Parmenides' teacher. So a lot of the time he was seen as sort of a pre-Parmenides, and in a way he is. He wrote in poetry just like Parmenides, and so there are similarities. But we can also see him as an extension of these Ionies, this material philosophy. So, what does it mean for the gods to have all the natural elements explained by natural principles, right? What do they now do? What is the role of an Olympian god? And Xenophanes would argue that these are just projections, essentially. That get the exact quote, but pigs would have gods that look like pigs, deer and goats would have gods that look like deer and goats. So that what we're doing is we're projecting our own human insecurity. And so there's maybe a modern take on that idea is like, oh, so let's take what's valuable in those stories of human worth and use them. But no, what he wants to do is look to what is impersonal, what is beyond our own projections, what is unlimited, what is infinite, what is beyond space and time. What is a God, conception of God that is stripped of all of the anthropomorphic notions, and again, even stripped of multiplicity, so there are no longer different gods that can disagree with one another, because how could an infinitely perfect being disagree with itself, right? It's all knowing and all powerful, so it would just agree. So there's just really one God here, and so we can look through these and if we can sort of try to combine and hold these two ideas of God as sort of like one material out of which we are all rarefied, created, this thing that is in motion, with also this idea that the sort of the commonplace Greek ideas and explanations are wrong. We should move instead towards this sort of logical God, this God that we understand based on our own, not on scripture, not on tradition, Homer, but on our own intuition, our own reason, I guess. We ask the question, what is fitting for God? And Xenophanes, was also sort of to explain things in earth and water were his two main principles. The world is half sea, half water, and so he would explain. Talks a lot about cloud. Stuff like
His description of stars is pretty accurate, where he says stars are just burning clouds, and the sun likewise is just burning clouds.
Yeah, I think, but I think instead of just saying like he is accurate to what we now believe, I think it's important to also say like why, or like what he's trying to do here, why he's giving this kind of explanation. So like, yeah, he is, yeah, he's got these incandescent clouds, and sort of like gas is like an incandescent cloud or whatever. But I guess he's trying to break it down again into these sort of simple constituent
Yeah,
laws.
he was also like looking at what was happening in nature. Part of the reason why, well, if we trust like what Aetius is saying, part of the reason is they saw like these little clouds of fire on ships called St. Elmo's fire. We see them on planes, like when you fly through a thunderstorm, or like upper level clouds. You can see this like these tiny clouds of like tiny lightning strikes in a way. And so it's like, oh, well, we can observe it. Like what I'm talking about, we can observe it. So from there, we can extrapolate. Like that's pretty cool, where you can like observe something and then make inferences about larger things based on the smaller observation.
Yeah, and I think it's important to see like this going hand in hand with this sort of religious critique, this idea of like, should you have a mythic explanation, or should you have a logic explanation? And the sort of the distinction here between mythos and logos. So in a mythos, you're sort of saying like, this is a set of stories that is a way to live your life. You might as well, like, what it means to be Greek. It was like, I've read the Iliad and the Odyssey, values and stuff. But it's not a statement about what is true about the world necessarily. And so they're making this claim like you should follow what is true about the world. You should pay attention to that, and in some sense like worship that now as a new spiritual thing. And so you can clearly see, not to get too weird about it, but like, Jesus is the logos, right? So we can see that this notion that you should worship the logos is going to be born out of these pre-Socratic philosophers. So watch out for that. Jesus next week. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, any discussion here now? Please, I'll just open the floor and shut up, and please just have at it. Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks for hosting it, Jacob.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, thank you for
This
hosting.
was awesome. Hell yeah.
Hmm.
So for next week, are we gonna keep going in the pre-Socratic reader, like
So,
into the Pythagoreans?
okay, so I thought I would take sort of the temperature of the room. Are you guys bored of this crap? Do you want to, like bounce ahead? Do you want to read like some Kant or read Nietzsche, or would you like to, stay with this? We'll try to do like, we can sort of go through it. I'm down. I think
I for,
Heraclitus would be very fun.
from
Parmenides would be fun, but yeah, let me know.
from my point of view, I'm interested in sort of continuing this thread all the way up to Aristotle, maybe, and then we could break out to other things.
Yeah, I
Awesome.
like going. I like the idea with going with a timeline.
Sweet.
Yeah, I agree. I also love Heraclitus, so if we skip him, I'll be sad.
Okay. Yeah. No, that sounds awesome. And yeah, no, I'm down to. So what I'd probably do is we'd go through this, and then we'd do Platonic dialogues. Obviously not can't do all of them. Probably not do the longer ones, but we could do if you were really into it, we could read the Symposium. That would be good. But that's pretty long. We could just read.
Is
We could just read like the Meno, like Euthyphro. You can read those in like an afternoon, one of those. Um, I would like us to read the Phaedo because I think it's that one that's, if you're gonna read any of them, you should probably read that one. Definitely have to read the Apology. That would be we do, and then maybe like the Timaeus because I have some stuff to say about it, but that's a lot. I don't know. We could also find excerpts. I could direction, and then yeah, we could get into Aristotle. So yeah, I mean, I'm down. That sounds fun to me. But yeah, I mean, if you get bored, just let me know. Yeah, I mean, also I appreciate your contribution. So like, if I don't just want to monologue at you guys. I want, feel free to interject and tell me that I'm wrong or I'm reading it,
yeah,
or just
absolutely.
to share your opinion.
Hell yeah. I'm just afraid of saying stupid shit.
No, no, you're good, dude. Like this is like early days, and we like literally don't know what these people are saying, right? The idea is like you're almost at an advantage because these ideas become so central to all of philosophy that they're like taken and interpreted, and those interpretations become very sort of fixed. So when I read this, I have to de like I try to remove all my interpretation like that. I try to not look at it. Like I try to forget all my philosophical knowledge and look at this. So you're in a good place. You just need to, like see what these people could be saying, right? Because I think they could be saying things that are a lot richer than Aristotle takes them to be saying. So all of this stuff is shaped by Aristotle's physics. He writes physics, and that sort of tells the history of all of these people in a way that serves Aristotle as like the guy who synthesizes and brings it all together. Um, so we have to be mistrusting of this opinion. We have to say like when Aristotle says that they mean material substance, like when they're talking about matter as a material or as a substance, are do they mean it like that? Does Thales maybe mean that everything comes out of water, but is maybe not directly made of water? Do things come out of the indefinite or the unlimited rather than simply are made of it in an Aristotelian sense? So I think we have to be careful.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I forgot the word I wanted to use, but it'd be cool if we could get like the end of each philosophical reading, sort of like a concise version of like what to take away. Is, Um, I think you said in the beginning, kind of like concisely, but I think I kind of forgot.
Nice, like a
What the-
summary.
Yes, summary. That's
Yeah.
the word I want. Yeah, I want a summary.
Sure. No, I would. So that's like, I guess, the notion that like these things are condensable. You can provide an explanation that is shorter or simpler in arche, the thing itself. I think the problem with these texts is that whenever you try to interpret something like this, it's just very difficult. And so any summary would be a little. So I just encourage you to engage with it, but if you want to, the second one of those texts I linked, um, that has a lot more commentary in it, where it's just like a guy explaining like what the views are in pretty simple language, and then he'll like quote to support his
Yeah,
interpretation.
I'll definitely read it.
Yeah, and his interpretation is legit, and it'll go through, for all the pre-Socratics, so you can read from that as we go. Yeah, I mean, I guess we'll do the. I guess we'll do the Pythagoreans next week. That do we? Is that even worth? I guess so. It'll be.
Yes, it's worth it because we get sort of some philosophy of math.
Yes, it will be. No, I love the Pythagoreans, and it'll
And
be important for Plato.
and there's some parallels with Eastern religions because vegetarianism comes up, as
Yes,
does reincarnation.
it does. It does absolutely.
And
Yeah, Pythagoras himself
Artun,
is a very
I just want,
mystical.
I just want, I just want a bit less of astrology. Thank you.
Listen,
we're gonna get some weirder stuff.
yeah. So
I know that we're gonna get more of it actually.
the level of astrology. So I don't know if astrology exists yet. So it could not. I think I gave
Astrology,
you an.
hold on, Jacob, that's factually incorrect. Astrology has always existed. So it's
Oh,
just a fact of nature. I don't know
I mean,
where you got that presupposition from.
so
Uh,
so the thing is, so a lot of our astrological stuff. Okay, so there is a controversy in academia, and it's like a pretty dumb controversy. But the idea is like, um, and it's not even. It's like a. Is it a controversy? Anyway, so this all of the astrology stuff, or like all of the sort of loop year stuff, the Hermetic tradition, as it's known, is the sort of works derivative of the Emerald Tablet in Hermes Trismegistus. It was thought that these were like truly ancient works, like older even than Plato. But we learned that no, these books were written in it's like the 3rd century BC, 300 BC, some or maybe no. I guess no, like 250. I'm really bad with dates. Anyway, after Alexander's kingdom, and basically the kingdom, Alexander's empire, and it all got sort of like split up. The Greek world was influenced by Eastern ideas. The Eastern Empire was influenced by Greek ideas, and there was sort of like a great these works on astrology or whatever come out of this time period of East, the Alexandrian world, this syncretic idea where, as a result of empire, they were sort of using in the way that the Catholic Church molded itself with saints and stuff to include pagan beliefs. This Alexandrian, or sort of like what was left of it after, he died and it was all split up. they were trying to sort of synthesize things together by drawing similarities between the Greek gods. There are these Near Eastern, so there were cults, Demeter, but also Isis. They were seen as like the same figure. There were, all sorts of mystery cults appeared. But these mystery cults, I guess, have been going on since even earlier, because Pythagoras was influenced by the Pythagoreans were influenced by the Orphic mystery cults, Italy. And there are definitely earlier instances. Like I think it's pretty clear the Babylonians and stuff had astrology and belief in all of that. So yeah, I mean, clearly it's an older practice. I think to read it onto these pre-Socratics, to say that when he's talking about things doing injustice to one another and like necessity according to the ordering of time, he's talking about some kind of progression of summer and winter and like an astrological thing. I don't know. I think that could be pushing. Might be a bit too strong of a read. But I think it's in there. It's like in the background. Maybe the rambling.
Also,
Okay.
Pythagoras goes into tuning systems, which we still use some of his theory for acoustics.
Yes, Pythagoras invented the scale, legendary Pythagoras, the musical scale. And yeah, I mean, no, I love the Pythagoreans, and it is an example of limit and unlimited. So if you notice me rambling on about the unlimited and the limit, like the limited and the unlimited, the Pythagoreans share these. So yeah, I think it'll be a good starting or good next step on our journey. Plato was very influenced by the Pythagoreans, and yeah, there is a lot of Pythagoreanism in mathematics. I think a lot of mathematicians are sort of unconsciously or consciously Pythagoreans in some sense. They believe that numbers are real and perhaps more real than reality itself.
It will be juicy.
It'll be juicy. Okay, so stay tuned. Thank you. Please just discuss amongst yourselves, or hopefully this reading sparked some interest or conversation. You can please continue it. But thanks for coming out. I'll say read the Pythagorean chapter for next week. I guess that should probably do us.
Yeah. Thanks, Jacob.
Jacob, how dare you even question the usefulness of philosophy? How dare you?
Hey, I mean, it happens right at the very beginning of all philosophy, right? It's like, is this even useful? And then he's like, wait, got rich. And then they're like, well, I guess it was useful. I don't know. You could see this in a Nietzschean sense, right? That it goes against the traditional values of like masculinity, what it is to like be a man, right? It's not really to be like some wise guy who like knows everything. It's like not able to like lift strong, like heavy objects because your wrists are like weak. But to be a nerd, right? In ancient Greece is pretty tough. So you have to prove your strength, right? So it's like a strategy. And is this strategy better than the other strategy? And I think it sort of shows itself that like now at this point, this strategy is going to start being very good. It's going to be better to be like a philosopher dude than a than a Homeric hero, or at least if you're trying to emulate someone. Does that make sense? I don't.
Oh yes, it does. I was kind of joking, but always.
No, you're good.
I like I really like this stuff. I don't know. It's really interests me for some reason. So it's definitely cool. There's also like philosophy were always like the most fun classes for sure.
Yeah. I mean, so you could critique this as like wrong, and I think it is wrong, but I think the way that these things progress is it's like you get wrong and then you like refine it, and then pretty soon you just have this like very refined wrong thing that like actually works pretty well, and then you know that's sort of like what science is in a way, right? um
Yeah. It's also because
so here we have like we're sort of like still in the very early stages, so it's like pure just like maybe it's water. You kind of like go through, you're like, well, can't really be water because like how can fire like be made out of water? Okay, maybe it's the indefinite. Okay, well, it could be the indefinite. But like then how can it be like nothing that I can see? Maybe it's like something that changes states, right? As it actually, it's like no, there's rarefaction, there's uh, condensation, or these states that change. One substance but different state. Um, so you can see how they're like each responding to the deficiencies of like the previous system.
yeah, that's also like kind of humbles you, I guess, because we're like so wrong. Like we're often really wrong, just like often wrong, right? It just makes you be a bit more open to changing your mind.
Yeah,
Humble
but
us.
I think we still have to look for consistency and where our ideas come short and stuff like that, right? You can't get complacent, even if you're in like a we're all just like in the idea that we've been given by history or whatever. We don't. This is not like the end. There'll be some other scientific knowledge that disproves whatever our current knowledge says. I think in a way. I don't know. So, but that still doesn't mean you want to throw it away, because it's still going to be very valuable and still provide some kind of like some fidelity of a view of what exists, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the thing I find the most interesting about this era is that there was a lot of simultaneous stuff going on in a lot of different cultures, and it's like people weren't really satisfied with just these easy explanations of God did it. It was like there was this, or gods, there was this curiosity, there was this desire to look into it, to know how things worked or what things were really made of. And I think, that's the beginning of math and the other sciences, and the beginning of the study of the human body and medicine. And they were trying to apply a lot of these things to everything they were looking at, and just understand the nature of where they found themselves in this reality. And I think that's just so cool to watch them try to work it out.
Jacob, um, if you could revive a philosopher and talk to him, show him the world, who would it be?
Oh man, that's hard. Um, I guess of these three, I think Anaximander is the one that interests me the most. Is sort of like he almost reminds me of like Deleuze in a way, where it's like got these hot and cold fronts pushing against each other, causing like interactions and hurricanes and stuff.
Sounds like
And like,
Hegel.
yeah, no, he is a well, it's like a materialist view. I don't, yeah, it's cool. I like an X-Mander, at least of these guys. But yeah, to what
Typical
Skydance said,
Marxist.
what Skydance said, I think no, that's really true. I think, but also like in addition to this sort of like you know like coming to this sort of Greek view, it's sort of it's also defensive in a way, so that the Greek people had their faith and their gods or whatever, and then they sort of came into contact with the Egyptians and the Babylonians and the Assyrian, the Persians, and there are these huge empires, and they had their own gods, and like, well, what's to separate my god from your god, and like what justifies. So in a way, the skepticism that comes out of like Xenophanes is sort of like a defensive posture, where it's like, oh no, I'm now just going to become very skeptical about all gods, and I'll have my own gods that are like not subject to such or escape such skeptical critique. But it is cool to watch them.
Can you elaborate on that one? That's pretty interesting.
So like, yeah, it's like if you are a tiny, you're the Greece, right? A tiny place that is sort of like dwarfed by ancient empires that have existed for like thousands of years. You have your gods, which you, in Homeric times, you held very dearly, right? But now you're like trading with them. You're like, now you're in a colony of Greece on, in Ionia. So like, there's a lot of like, you know, uh, transmission, other gods being worshipped. Who knows, like, how you felt if you believe your god is like the one and only god, but then it turns out that there's actually 1,000-year-old empire that has existed that believes differently. So in a way, this sort of skepticism towards gods or whatever as explanations, this turn away from mythos in general towards logos, is sort of a defensive maneuver. And it's one Plato definitely is in, where he sees like the loss of prestige of these Homeric gods, and sort of tries to like establish like the Greek authority through establishing like the forms in his own. So, but here it definitely exists through like just a skeptical act. And
Interesting.
yeah, does that make sense? Does that sit with you? Where it's like, yeah, it's almost like a defensive mode. I don't know, but maybe I'm psychoanalyzing it.
No, I think it's interesting for sure.
I think it makes sense.
Cool.
Think. But wait,
I don't know. I don't know. What about you, Dantes? Which one of these philosophers would you have?
uh, of the pre-Socratic,
Yeah, sure.
well, I think,
Or just in
yeah,
general.
well, of the three, Eximenes, I guess, because I don't know, I think like um he would be more open, I guess, especially because like I think it would be cool to see his reaction, especially since he's more like like more towards epistemology or like more epistemic. I think it would be interesting because I think you would love that shit. Um, and then overall, I don't know. To be honest, to be fair, I don't really know our philosophers well enough to really say. I mean, it's probably gonna be some Greek. No, fair.
No, that's definitely. Yeah, we can all think about that over the week. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I don't know if you ever.
I mean,
Yeah, if you
I
think,
would kill them again if they start talking about fucking astrology, but yeah.
fair enough. Fair enough. Um, but you can see how that was an alternate explanation from, I guess, the gods. So to say, like, that Saturn did it through like a beam that it shot out a heavenly efflusion would be a different explanation than like that the god Saturn decided, like a whim, to do it. So like we're on the way to science, but we're not all the way there.
Hmm. Yeah, like it seems that these philosophers are like committing like a bunch of fallacies, you know. So it's like,
Oh yeah, I mean it's we're gonna feel free to point them out as we go, but it's not until Aristotle that we're gonna get uh, logic sort of like laid out formally, um, but we'll see it emerge with Parmenides and with, well, I mean, I guess Parmenides mostly, um, and certainly Socrates and his, the Socratic method is all about finding contradictions, right? Sort of like a mode of logic in the Socratic method, and yeah, so we'll find it emerge through these sorts of things, but yeah, I mean, here we are making mistakes, right? We're getting messy. It's like Miss Frizzle said. We're
yeah, I really like this because this is like exactly what I wanted, like giving me the foundation which I'm looking for.
nice. Yeah, I mean, it's I think you could say that it is sloppy, right? And it is, but if you don't have like a basic system, right? Like now that we like know, like we're like very, we're scientists, we're working within, like the newest, like newest models of quantum physics. We're like, doing it, right? We have for like a worldview, we have like a theory. We have to be very precise. But if we like don't even have a theory, if it's like literally just like you and me, and we're just like, I think everything is made of water, then we can sort of like talk kind of casually and be like, well, I think there's some like pretty big holes with this. And then you'll try to do better. You'll be like, well, maybe it's, the indefinite. And then, that's actually quite a bit better. And then we're like, that's good. And then we maybe come up with the flaws of that it's not empirical or whatever. And then, so we can sort of go as we go. And uh, yeah, no, I think it makes sense that if you don't have a coherent system, you want to move fast like this. You don't want to worry about. You want to be sort of like wildly speculative, take those leaps. And yeah, we're going to be taking a lot of leaps and going in different directions. Perhaps the universe is made of fire or water or all four and some forces. And
Hell yeah. So
basically, they'll
was
all
there
just get stacked.
was there
Philosophy is a lot about stacked.
was there an element we missed? Because I think we talked about fire, talked about
We,
water,
we
we talked
haven't
about
we
air.
haven't hit the fire yet. There's been like a fiery sphere in an Anaximander's thing. So we've talked about it a little bit, but
Is there another element that they talk about? Also,
um,
I remember in my
well,
philosophy
there
class,
is the
I've heard about this
quintessence,
before.
the legendary fifth element.
No, God, because I think I studied this at one point in philosophy class and thought that it was a word for this, for like these thoughts, fire or the air, water. I don't. What's the word? Because I don't know it.
Oh, the elements. I guess they're just the four
No,
elements.
like I don't know for these people. I don't know.
Oh,
Or like,
these are the Fusakoi, or the pre-Socratic philosophers.
I don't think it's that. But never mind. Doesn't matter.
like Milesian school.
It's fine.
I don't know. I don't know what other classifications they'd fall in.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're I think most properly they're the Fusakoi. And if I can drill that into your head one more time, the Fusakoi, because when you read the Phaedo,
Seems like a
Socrates is going to
name.
mention Fusakoi, and it's going to be
Seems
very
like a
important.
name a fish has.
No, it's cool. Yeah, yeah. In the Phaedo, Socrates gives his autobiography and sort of talks about how he was a Fusakoi and like was bad at it and decided that it was bad, and then you know elaborates his own path, which is different than this, and it's cool. So it's important to get our our bearings here, and yeah, so glad to have interested people. So cool.
Hell yeah. I just want to say real quick to steal your event. We're gonna have a debate. We're gonna have two debates later. We're gonna have one in about 35 minutes. It's a mock debate tournament between Flaccid and Deontologist, and the debate is gonna be about whether there should be laws prohibiting women going topless in public. And then afterwards, we have a debate between John Lyon and Avid about the shape of the Earth.
Ooh, hope John Lyon was taking notes earlier. So
Oh god.
learning
Yeah,
from the ancients.
I don't know. Like, I think like I mean, sometimes I feel like we're being like really lenient towards these philosophers. Like Arco said, oh, he said like those are like hot clouds or some shit, right? Burning clouds. I mean, it's like yeah. I mean, are they? I mean, we wouldn't say that they're close if someone said it in today's standards, but I guess they're close and by their standards back then, the information they had.
Right. I think it's important. You got to look at what the way they're trying to explain it, not like their explanation. Their explanation is bad, right? It's dumb or whatever. There's like probably like 10 things wrong with it you could point out, but you know, in the absence of evidence with just speculation, the way that they're going about it, just trying to, give a naturalistic explanation rather than just be like, Zeus commanded the lightning to strike. It's like, no, when the hot and cold like fronts hit one another, there was like a buildup and the vent opened and then there was a lightning strike. So
Yeah, I really like that. I think that's I think that yeah, I respect that for sure.
yeah. So it's like, yeah, I mean we're early days here. And this is you know,
What about the pre-Socratics?
ooh. So those are people like Imhotep or the ancient Zoroastrian sages, or the ziggurats in Babylon or in ancient Sumer. They had observatories on the top of them, like pyramids with steps and observatories on the top of them, where there were ancient um, you know star charts, right? And they would do things like they didn't really know how it worked, but they would just do like brute force like calculations of like, oh, there's been a eclipse every year for the past like there's been an eclipse every like 35 years on this, yeah, or something like that. So they would know sort of like brute things like that, with literally like thousands of years of observation.
That's
all
pretty cool.
recorded and like analyzed by like a priesthood. There were basically these tablets in I guess in Babylon. They would so they'd be cuneiform, and down one side it would say if, and then in the middle it would say then, and it would be like, I don't know, like 100 statements. So it would be like if this then that. So like if, and most of them are sort of like, again, like fortune telling sort of things, like if a hawk flies westward across the sky, then the crops will do well this year, something like that. If like it flies eastward, then the crops will do poorly. And it'll be like a whole tablet of that. And then sort of like the court, like in a court, you'd have someone whose job it was to read these tablets and keep these tablets and know all of these laws. And then in terms of like Hammurabi's code and stuff, that was also formulated in the exact same way, so that it was like if you steal from someone, then your hand will be cut off, or if you take an eye, then your eye will be taken. So
Unless,
laws kind of came up out of this sort of if then kind of idea. And the same people, these sort of like scribes, would be the keepers of these laws. And like the ones who could read and pass them down, all that stuff. And yeah, and we can still find these cuneiform tablets like everywhere. If you go, I mean, maybe not now, but like back in the day, you could just like go to Iraq and ride into the desert and find like 1,000 of these cuneiform tablets and haul them back to the British Museum or whatever.
yeah.
So these people were sort of like, I guess, the wise people of their day. And in the East, you have, their own tradition. And one thing we're doing here is like, I cannot bill myself in any way as like an expert on Eastern philosophy, and I think just due to the sort of like the way I was educated, which is very limited, right? We just don't really, we just don't teach that, right? So when we're talking about the beginnings of philosophy, the first statement of philosophy, it's like, well, pretty sure they were doing like philosophy in India for like 500 years, like before this, or whatever. So
Well, and they
yeah,
also were doing similar things at the time. Like whenever in Greek they were talking about justified true belief, in India they were talking about warranted true belief. The difference being external reliability rather than the internal justification for knowledge.
Sure. Yeah. I saw that video you sent me. Yeah.
Nagarjuna was based. Some people called him the second Buddha, but he was using logic. Like, imagine the Buddha, but someone who is obsessed with logic. He invented a whole school of logic.
Yeah, that's pretty dope.
In the West, we find it kind of funny, but it's the tetralemma, basically. It's possible I don't know if he actually invented it, but people say he invented it. I don't know how true that is. I'd have to verify it. But at any rate, he used it to a great deal. And tetralemma is where you have true, false, both true and false, and then neither true or false. So you have the four options. True is one, false is another, both is the third, and then neither is the fourth. So they call it tetralemma.
That's cool.
Yeah, dialetheism before it was way before.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Yeah. So I mean, I think it is definitely true that so Thales and people like Pythagoras, legendarily and no way accurately can we say that about Pythagoras, but Empedocles all went to the East. When I say to the East, I mean like maybe to Egypt, maybe to the Near East, maybe like I don't know how far east, who knows, but so they sort of like returned with this knowledge. And I think, to look at something like the transmigration of souls, that belief, and some of these other beliefs about like the divinity of the individual, I think these are clearly like Eastern inspired beliefs.